What's up YouTube, Zero here, and today I have an epic natural disaster build for the Sorcerer in Dragon's Dogma 2. In this video, I'll go over the spells required for this Sorcerer build, of course focused on the heavy hitting natural disaster spells. Then I'll get into what augments you want on the Sorcerer as part of this build. Then after I go over the spells and augments, I'll get into the vocations of your pawns, because of course every build in Dragon's Dogma 2 is also going to be enhanced by the pawn vocations that you have as part of your party. Then at the end of the video, I'll get into what equipment you definitely want to be on the lookout for to enhance this build and make this natural disaster sorcerer build an extremely epic build. Before I get into it, I do want to say, if you do enjoy this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more Dragon's Dogma content. I do a bunch of other RPGs and video games, so feel free to check those out as well. Without further ado, let's get into the build. Spells are going to be the bread and butter of any sorcerer build. For this natural disaster sorcerer build, let's start with the Blizzard High Haggle. High Haggle is an absolutely fantastic spell for not just a natural disaster sorcerer, but any sorcerer in general. Sorcerers don't like being hit. What High Haggle does is it summons a blizzard in an area of effect. Any enemies caught in that blizzard do take damage over time, as well as get slowed. Of course, this is great because the sorcerer doesn't want to get hit, so as those enemies are slowed, it allows for you, the sorcerer, as well as your pawns to damage a slowed enemy who can't move as quickly as that enemy normally would. On top of that, you do have a slight chance to freeze the enemy. Although I have found this as being rare, I have frozen a few enemies utilizing High Haggle, and if you do get that freeze, even better. The enemy is not moving at all, allowing you and your pawns to easily take your damage to the next level on an enemy who's not moving. So High Haggle is fantastic for the sorcerer because not only does it summon a blizzard, but it's damaging enemies over time and slowing them down for both you and your pawns. Next, I want to talk about Augural Flare. Now, Augural Flare may not necessarily be a natural disaster, but it's going to be a disaster for your enemies. What Augural Flare does is it is a spell that attaches to an enemy, and the more that enemy is hit, this Augural Flare builds up over time and then explodes depending upon the amount of hits that were done to the enemy as long as the Augural Flare was active. So this can be absolutely epic for a sorcerer and the pawns when you have this landmine or Augural Flare, Solar Flare maybe, attached to an enemy, being hit over time and then just exploding on the enemy. Maybe we can consider this like a volcano explosion, where it builds up over time and then just explodes for massive amounts of damage. So while the name doesn't necessarily say natural disaster, it's absolutely going to be a disaster for enemies. I love Augural Flare for several reasons. One, you can actually use Quick Spell with Augural Flare, and I'll get into the reason why that's great in a second, but the two next skills that I have on the Sorcerer, you can't use Quick Spell for. So utilizing Quick Spell on a spell that's going to deal a lot of damage is absolutely awesome. Two, if you're able to hit an enemy a lot with both you and your pawns, especially a boss, you can deal a massive amount of damage, so that's great as well. And you can move when you're able to cast this. Of course, not all moves, the epic moves that you're able to unlock as a sorcerer, you can't move when you're casting. So Augural Flare attaches to an enemy. You can hit that enemy a bunch of times with you and your pawns, and then this deals an explosion, dealing a massive amount of damage. So it's an absolutely epic move for not just a natural disaster build, but for any sorcerer build, because it can deal a lot of damage pretty quickly. So I love that for this build. You can utilize this in really any scenario, although I found it better on bosses, especially when you get into a boss battle in which you have to move a little bit. There are certain times in boss battles when you as a sorcerer can't just stand still. So Augural Flare is going to help you deal that high damage to those bosses while still being able to maneuver the battlefield. So I love that as part of this build. The next two are going to be your Grand Maester spells. It's going to be the Maelstrom and the Meteoron. Both of these are absolutely epic spells. You do have to go on a bit of a quest to get both of them, but once you get them, they're going to be utilized most often. I love both of these, and they're absolutely epic and important for a natural disaster sorcerer build. First, let me talk about Meteoron. Now, this is going to summon meteors in a large area that damages any enemy in its path. So it's great for very big battles in which you're battling a lot of lesser enemies. It's also great for boss battles when you're damaging an enemy who likes to move around a lot. Because it deals in a great area, an enemy who maneuvers around a lot, such as an ogre, it's going to be great for, because the ogre isn't going to stand still and wait for you to hit it. So Meteoron is great because it's going to hit that ogre in that area that the ogre is moving in and deal a lot of damage to him. So Meteoron is fantastic for a natural disaster and any sorcerer build because it's calling those meteors in, hitting the lesser enemies if you're in a battle with lesser enemies, but it's also really high damage on the bosses as well. And last but most certainly not least, it's actually my favorite spell, is Maelstrom. Now, Maelstrom is going to summon a hurricane or tornado in an area. What's great about Maelstrom is it hits bosses insanely hard, especially depending on the boss, and it also wraps lesser enemies up inside of the hurricane and just throws them. It damages them while they're wrapped up, and then it throws them. Any lesser enemy that's caught in your Maelstrom or Meteoron is going to be toast really quickly. Maelstrom is even great for bosses such as a lesser dragon. Anyone who knows, the lesser dragon's weak spot is its heart. Maelstrom, if you cast it on the heart, will actually get underneath the dragon, dealing damage to the heart and actually wreaking havoc on the dragon's health. I've actually run through several health bars of a dragon with one cast of Maelstrom. So it's absolutely awesome, especially for dragons. Maelstrom also was able to help me defeat a griffin within 1 minute and 30 seconds, so it can wreak havoc on a lot of different enemies. But Meteoron, on the other hand, I actually came across a sleeping Cyclops, and I killed it while it was sleeping in one fell hit of a meteor crashing down on this Cyclops. So both are absolutely fantastic. It depends on the situation, but these 4 spells, High Haggle for your Blizzard, Maelstrom for your Hurricane, Meteoron for your meteors, and Augural Flare for that volcano explosion, is an absolutely epic spell combination for a natural disaster sorcerer build or a sorcerer build in general, because all of these are great to slow enemies down and then hit them extremely hard. Now, of course, some of the drawbacks with Maelstrom and Meteoron, because they are those epic spells, is that you can't utilize Quick Spell for either of them, and you're actually stuck where you're casting. So the reason why I do like to have Augural Flare as part of this is because it is a heavy damage dealing move that you can actually utilize Quick Spell and move the battlefield while you're casting it. So in situations where you are facing an enemy who may be targeting you, or maybe it's an enemy that is calling in a lot of various spells, such as a dragon, you can utilize Augural Flare in place of the other two, just so you can get a nice spell off and deal some damage while you're trying to find the right place on the battlefield where the enemy won't attack you. So those are the spells. Now let's get into the augments and talk about what's really going to enhance this build as a natural disaster sorcerer. Augments are fantastic to enhance any build in Dragon's Dogma 2. The sorcerer has a lot of different augments that he or she can equip to enhance a build. For this natural disaster build, augments are going to be extremely important so you can enhance the spells and overall build of this natural disaster sorcerer build. So first, the augments that you can get just from leveling up the sorcerer vocation that I recommend equipping on this build. The first, which is just unlocked at vocation 2 of the sorcerer, Asperity. This is going to increase the likelihood of inflicting debilitations with your attack. I mentioned earlier that inflicting slow and freeze with your high haggle can be crucial for a sorcerer, so Asperity is going to help this out. That's one of the reasons why this can be extremely important to have this augment, and of course, it's really easy to unlock Asperity. As long as you're leveling up your sorcerer, you're going to unlock this really early on. Second that I recommend from the sorcerer is going to be Sagacity. This is going to augment your magic. You're dealing a lot of damage with these high damage spells, so why not increase the damage even further? Now, this is going to take a little bit more grinding, but if you're loving the sorcerer like I am, you'll have no problem getting to the max vocation, and that's where you're going to have to be to unlock Sagacity, which is rank 9, but you're going to be able to augment your magic. Next is going to be an augment from the mage, Exaltation. Exaltation, you're going to have to grind out the mage to vocation rank 9, but what this does is it augments your stamina recovery speed. We're utilizing on this natural disaster sorcerer a lot of heavy hitting spells, but because they're heavy hitting, they're going to require a lot of stamina. Anything stamina wise that you can do for your sorcerer is going to be greatly appreciated. So Exaltation, augmenting your stamina recovery speed, is going to be very crucial for this build. However, you are going to have to grind out the mage to get to vocation rank 9 to unlock Exaltation. Now next, we're going to have an augment from the archer. This is going to be from rank 4 vocation of the archer, but it's endurance, and this increases your maximum stamina. Again, focusing on the stamina, but this is extremely important because, of course, endurance increasing your maximum stamina, allowing you to cast spells more often, and then we have that augment that I just talked about, Exaltation from the mage, that's going to give us an increased stamina recovery. So we're going to be able to cast our spells more often and more quickly, essentially, because we're going to have our stamina sooner. Next is going to be an augment from the thief. We are a class, the sorcerer, who doesn't like being hit. There's really no way as a sorcerer to defend yourself. So you're going to want Subtlety, which is actually only rank 2 vocation of the thief, but this is going to decrease the likelihood of being targeted by foes. You really want your pawns to be taking the hits. You don't want the enemies to target you. So Subtlety from rank 2 of the thief is going to be crucial for this build. And last but not least, I like to utilize Voracity. What Voracity does is it recovers a small amount of stamina when you deliver the killing blow to a target. Again, with the stamina recovery. But what's nice about this is when you're casting those heavy moves, such as Maelstrom or Meteoron, you're going to be killing a lot of enemies if you're facing lesser enemies. So when you wrap all of those enemies up in your Hurricane, they're going to get thrown, they're going to die, and you're going to recover your stamina. So that's absolutely amazing as well. Of course, that's from the Magic Archer. Voracity is from the Magic Archer rank 4. So if you don't really want to grind the Magic Archer or go find the Magic Archer for Voracity, then I would just recommend going back to the Sorcerer and equipping Catalyst, which you get at rank 8, which increases damage dealt when exploiting a hostile target's elemental weakness. So while I do recommend Voracity over Catalyst, you can utilize Catalyst and still do well with this build, because some people may not want to grind for the Magic Archer just to get Voracity, so you can utilize Catalyst in its place. But these augments are absolutely going to enhance the build and make you an epic natural disaster sorcerer. Now let's get into what vocations you want on your pawns to make this build even better. I've talked about the spells, I've talked about the augments. Now it's time to talk about the pawns that really enhance this sorcerer build. One, this sorcerer build doesn't have a lot in terms of healing or getting rid of debilitations. What plays perfect with a sorcerer, actually any vocation you choose, is a mage. Mages are great pawn vocations for support. Mages can heal, mages can cure debilitations. So the first pawn vocation I recommend is a mage, to provide that support that the sorcerer is going to need that the sorcerer can't provide for him or herself. Yes, you can use potions, but sometimes in the heat of battle, it makes it a lot more difficult, and it makes it so you have to have inventory management a little bit more. Just having a pawn via a mage that already does that is going to be fantastic for the sorcerer. The next two pawn vocations that I recommend are two vocations that can take a lot of enemies and take a lot of damage. So I recommend utilizing 2 fighters, 2 warriors, or a fighter and a warrior, a combination of the beefier vocations so they can take the enemy damage. Those 2 fighter and warriors are the more close and personal damage dealers and takers. They can play defense as well as offense, and they do great to take away enemy fire from the sorcerer. The sorcerer doesn't like being hit, so you want a couple of vocations that like taking that damage. So a fighter and a warrior, or 2 fighters or 2 warriors, are great to take that damage. So for the 3 pawn recommendations, I recommend a mage, a warrior, a fighter, or a combination of those 2. But definitely a mage and a couple of fighters, couple of warriors, or a fighter and a warrior. Now, finally, let's get into the equipment. Really, the main focus are going to be the rings and the staff. The outside equipment, you're trying not to get hit, so it's not as important. You still want as much defense as possible, but it's not as important as your staff and the rings to enhance your build. I'm going to talk about the staff and the rings for this natural disaster sorcerer build first, because these are more important. You're an offensive powerhouse, you're trying not to get hit. The defensive equipment isn't going to matter as much. As long as you're not getting hit, you're going to be perfectly okay. But first, let's talk about the staff. This staff is absolutely epic. It's the Lion Lord's Arch Staff. Now, where you can find this is Grisha's Armory in the Sacred Arbor. It's very important to get this because it is an extremely powerful staff and really boosts your magic, allowing the sorcerer to deal a ton of damage. So I definitely recommend checking this out in Grisha's Armory in the Sacred Arbor as part of your build. Now, for the rings, I've talked about stamina so much, and I'm going to continue doing so. 2 rings, both helping out with stamina. First, the Ring of Momentum. Now, the Ring of Momentum you can find in a lot of different varieties. You can actually get this as an extremely rare drop from Cyclopses. You could get this as a reward for completing the Phantom Oxcart quest, and there's also locations on the map inside chests, one near Thunderclap Cave. So, a variety of ways to get the Ring of Momentum, but what this does is it moderately boosts maximum stamina. So, of course, great for the Sorcerer, who's going to be utilizing a lot of stamina. Next is going to be the Ring of Triumph. This is a ring that boosts maximum health, maximum stamina, and the amount of weight that the Sorcerer can carry. Of course, the main focus is going to be boosting the maximum stamina. And how you get the Ring of Triumph is turning in 15 Seeker tokens. So that's a fairly easy one to get, but one that is great and has served me well because it's boosting the maximum stamina for my Sorcerer. Now, for the equipment, there's not much to this. You don't have to grind too much. The hood I have on is the Friar's Hood, which can be purchased from Bjorn's Armory in Vernworth, one of the first cities you get to, one of the first hoods you could probably get in this game for a Sorcerer. You can get immediately and keep this until I'm pretty much at the end game at this point, and I'm still using this. That's just how either little I care about my defensive equipment, or just I haven't found anything I want to purchase yet, or found just exploring Dragon's Dogma yet. The body is going to be the Eris Morpho robe. Now this is, as long as you get Maelstrom, you're going to unlock this robe with Maelstrom. You just have to complete the Sorcerer's Appraisal quest, and you unlock this as well as Maelstrom. So you get 2 for 1. This is a great piece of armor to equip and keep on for a very long time. Again, haven't found any other armor that I want to equip over this, so it's something that you're going to get along your journey as long as you're getting Maelstrom. For my legs, I have the Practitioner's Hosen. Again, I'm keeping it simple. This is from Boda's Armory in Back Batal. Again, something easy you could purchase and equip and still utilize to great effect. Again, I'm not trying to get hit as a Sorcerer, especially a Natural Disaster Sorcerer, so I don't have to worry too much about defense. And finally, for my cape, I have the Saurian Scale Cape. This cape you can find in Stormwing Cave. You can also purchase from Chandler's General Store in Har Village. So a couple of places to get this, very easy one to get, but again, decent for equipment. But the major focuses are going to be on the rings, with the Ring of Momentum and the Ring of Triumph, which both boost max stamina, and then the Lion Lord's Archstaff, which is insanely powerful staff that I recommend getting as early on as you can, and this is in Grisha's Armory in the Sacred Arbor. So I have come down to the end of this epic Natural Disaster Sorcerer build. Let me know in the comment section what y'all think of this build. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you really love this build as much as I do and deal a ton of damage. I've been wrecking a lot of enemies, even dragons, with this build, so I hope y'all do the same. Let me know in the comment section what you think of this build, what you would change. Make sure you give a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. It does really help out me and my channel. Thank you so much in advance for doing so. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and until next time, peace.